Okay, so this video is all about Poland. Poland's involved in three really big dust-ups right now. Last week in Canada, there was a big issue. The week before, a few days before that, in at the UN, there was a big issue, and then just recently, there's another big issue. So Poland is all in the news right now. Let's talk about Poland first. I'm going to talk about how we resolved the Ukraine-Poland issue before we get done with this video, but I'm going to touch on the others along the way. And I'm going to tell you why Poland's important. Here's Poland on the map. And Poland, we've for years kind of discounted as it was part of the former Soviet Union's bloc, the Warsaw Pact. It's actually Warsaw is right here in Poland. Warsaw Pact. These are the not Russian, like was absorbed by the Baltic states, I believe were absorbed by Russia, Soviet Union proper. But they were still part of this pact, which included other states that had been gobbled up by the Soviet Union or under their control. So in the EU, it's really Germany and France, and to some degree the United Kingdoms that were the big players. The UK is no longer part of EU, but France and Germany were kind of the big players. And then there were other states that were involved, but really they were the lion's share. I think when this is done, Poland, the Baltics, and Ukraine are going to really become a significant bloc in the EU that's going to counterbalance maybe what Germany or France or whatever is going to do, and they're becoming larger. They're also getting billions of aid and a loan from the United States to upgrade their military. Okay, so let's talk about what happened last week. First, we'll go to the issue in Canada. So there was a Canadian that was honored in the Canadian Parliament. And they went, oh, well, he fought against Russia, and he is a Canadian, and let's give him a hand. Okay, unfortunately, he was a Nazi officer, and this was a terrible look, and somebody didn't do their homework. They honored this guy, a standing ovation, and that was just, they should never have brought the guy in. Okay. Justin Trudeau talking about this was talking about how it was just a train wreck of a thing. We apologize, but what is Russia propaganda going to do? Well, Russia propaganda is doing its work right now, but it was an unforced error. It should not have happened. Okay. Now it's true. The Toronto Sun, Poland, starting the extradition process against this Canadian who served with the Nazis. So, and to some degree, this is rightly so. I mean, this was not a good thing to bring the guy in before Canada Parliament for recognition. But, I mean, he also was a bad guy years ago. His name is Jaroslav Hunka. Now, I talked about Poland before that. Okay, and this was Poland rift over the grain deal, no more weapons for Ukraine. And honestly, this is my take on it. This scares me. The rift between the Ukraine and Poland is very, very dangerous. And then I talked about an update of why that might be going on. Well, there's political elections in a couple of weeks. Maybe there's some more about this. Before that, I think the only time I talked about Poland was when I interviewed Poland's consul general about the counteroffensive and how they were supplying weapons and all this. This was a great interview, by the way. I'm going to link that below because I think this is something like you can get a sense of where Polish sympathies lie, how they think about things, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go on and just give a little bit of the backstory about Poland's spat with Ukraine. This is from CNN, and then I will go and I'll talk about what Ukraine had just put out about how they think they've solidified the grain deal, and then the other video I'll show you is RT's take the day before, where they're just playing it up. There's one more thing that's going on with Poland, and I just want to mention it, but I'm not going to really speak to it, is that there's an immigration crisis between the EU and Poland, but that's for another day. And here, let's talk about the grain deal. This is CNN talking about it.
The minister said Warsaw would pull the plug on sending new weapons to Kyiv amid a bitter dispute over Poland's ban on Ukrainian grain imports. But on Thursday, Poland's president walked back on the prime minister's statement, suggesting it was misunderstood.
Premier mówił o tym uzbrojeniu.
The Prime Minister talked about this weapons in the context of the new weapons we are buying for our army. Yes, that was the statement. In my opinion, the Prime Minister said we will not transfer to Ukraine new weapons that we are currently purchasing as a part of the modernization of our army.
Lithuania stepped
Okay,
into
see,
the
that's
dispute on
kind of
Thursday,
true.
offering to.
So that's kind of true, but in the context in which it came up, or just at the time that it came up and other statements going on, it was kind of a rebuke to Ukraine. Now, Ukraine was involved in an unforced error. They sued through the World Trade Organization the Poles for banning grain on their markets. And I understand why the Poles wouldn't want grain on their markets, because it's hurting Polish farmers. They don't mind it passing through, but they don't want it staying in Poland. Okay. But Ukraine, I mean, like, these guys have been in your corner so much. They should not have been doing that. You got to pick your battles. But I get why it was important, but at the same time, pick your battles. So in that context, I think it really was like that, and he's walking it back, trying to smooth things over at this point a little bit more.
Mediate in this social media post here. Katie Polglaze has been monitoring all of this. I mean, they have stepped back slightly if you look at the president's words. But I was in Poland earlier in the year, and it's amazing how much support there was for Ukraine. It's surprising to think that they might be pulling back from that.
And it really is. The Poles have been Ukraine's staunchest defenders, and it's partly because they're in the same boat, and they both have to face down Russia.
Exactly, and there is an indication here that maybe Ukraine underestimated quite how seriously Poland was going to get upset about all of this dispute, hence why we saw such extreme language, really, in terms of how dissatisfied Ukraine was with the Polish response to banning Ukrainian grain. And now, clearly, they are recognizing how upset Poland has got, and now this declaration about potentially not giving new weapons to Ukraine as well. Clearly, there is now a climb down from the Ukrainian side, talking about that this is not a crisis. They can talk about it. Various different members of the Ukrainian leadership, the agrarian minister, the foreign minister Poland, Zelensky himself, all of them now saying that there are ways to get around this. And it's also worth mentioning as well that this is because that Poland and Ukraine have similar security concerns at the end of the day. And so have a listen to what Ukraine's ambassador to Poland said just yesterday about this.
I believe that this cooperation will continue because I believe that military support for Ukraine is in the interest of the Republic of Poland, because it's not charity or philanthropy. It's also an investment in their own security. We must do everything to stop this enemy in Ukraine so that the Russian boot does not trample on Polish soil.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, so they know that they are connected in that same way. Okay, so let's continue a little bit here. The new Minister of Defense from Ukraine, Rusim Umerov, was just having a conversation with his counterpart and thanking them for their leadership in the tank coalition. And really, it was Poland driving that way back when. The Abrams just arrived in Ukraine within the last couple of days, and it was the Poles that were pushing the Germans to provide the first the first tanks from Europe. Okay, so here's another tweet or X, or I don't even know what you call it. What do you call this now that it's renamed X? Robert Tellis, Poland's agricultural minister, said that talks with Ukraine about grain imports are going in a good direction. Polish president said that Poland is creating grain corridors for grain to pass quickly through its country where it's needed most. So all this started with the Black Sea grain deal blowing up, and you can't use the Black Sea to get things out. So, well, how do you push it out? How do you get it out of Ukraine? And it's got to go through these corridors as opposed to going through the Black Sea. But if it was just being, dropped on your neighbor, that's a different story. So that's where we are there. Okay, here is how Ukraine, this is UATV in English, Ukraine-Poland grain conflict, how far will it go? This is Ukraine's take on it, and then we'll show you Russia's take on it afterwards. Russia's take is priceless.
Disagreements between Kyiv and Warsaw have been resolved. Ukraine and Poland agreed to fund a joint solution to the controversial issue of exporting Ukrainian agricultural products.
The two sides reaffirmed the close and constructive relations they have demonstrated on many occasions and agreed to work out a way forward on export cooperation in the near future. Further talks will take place in the coming days to discuss issues prepared by both sides. The Polish side will also study Ukraine's export plan and prepare its proposals. From the message.
Okay, so it looks like they're working out something. And, honestly, this was on Zelensky for the hot words in the UN, where he should not have put those lines in. And I really think highly of Zelensky. Look over here. I wrote the book on Zelensky here about this, covered the war from the very beginning through the first about 6 months of the war up through about Servetinetsk and Lysychansk, and then I had switched over to YouTube to do these. So I think very highly of the guy, but he should not have put those words into the UN speech, which kind of triggered all the kerfuffle here.
On the website of the Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine.
The plan presented by Ukraine will consist of several components. European Commission spokesperson Miriam Garcia-Ferrer said that Kyiv was ready to share information on the export of 4 types of products that are at the center of the trade dispute, conduct information campaigns for Ukrainian exporters about the specifics of the market of neighboring countries, and provide data on the destinations of exported products. The most important component of the plan is a verification and authorization mechanism, a sort of export license system.
Okay, that licensing system that they worked out a similar kind of thing with Serbia. Then now they're working out with Poland and the other 2 countries that were involved. So it looks like they're solving their problem here.
Licenses will be applied, and these licenses will provide complete predictability for the Polish side of what volume and what crop Ukraine would like to sell to Poland. That is, every supplier who wants to sell a certain volume will contact the Ministry of Economy. The Ministry of Economy will contact the Polish authorities and say that there is such a supplier who wants to supply to Poland. And if a farmer or processor proves to their government that it cannot live without this Ukrainian grain, then Poland will give its permission for the import.
If there is an alternative, that is, there is an opportunity to buy Polish grain, says Horbachev, then this is probably what the Polish authorities will do. At the same time, the transit of agricultural products that pass through the territory of Poland will continue. It is important to understand that Poland has never been a target market for Ukrainian grain. About 10% of exports pass through its territory in transit, said the Minister of Agricultural Policy and Food of Ukraine, Mykola Solsky. Therefore, the reasons for the conflict between Kyiv and Warsaw should be sought not so much on the economic as on the political level. Before the election.
Okay, so if you heard that, it's very few actually very little of Ukrainian grain actually stays in Poland. It's not an economic, but there's a political issue here, and they should be sorting that out politically. Well, again, there's elections in 2 weeks or so, and hopefully this thing will, just blow over very shortly. But it looks like they worked out the details of what they need to work out. Okay, let's look at how the Russians have framed this exact same thing. This is Warsaw-Kyiv drama. Polish Prime Minister warns Zelensky not to insult Poles again. Okay, well, again, it was an unforced error. It was a bad look. They shouldn't have done it, but I think they can get around it. Okay, here we are.
Zelensky awarded 2 Polish volunteers state honours. That somewhat belies the increasingly strained relationship between Kiev and Warsaw, with the spat over...
Notice the headline here, best frenemies, right? And they're going to try to blow that up. Let's hear what they have to say.
Grain imports and weapon supplies brewing. Poland has been a steadfast ally of its neighbour, supporting Ukraine from the very start of the conflict. But Kiev's recent comments have caused fury back in Poland, which is already heavily impacted by the collapse of the grain deal. With Polish parliamentary elections approaching, Warsaw is keen to appease its voters and has sought to win over farmers in particular by blocking all agricultural imports from Ukraine.
But I also want to tell President Zelensky never to insult Poles again, as he did recently during his speech at the UN. Poles will never allow this, and defending the good Polish name is not only my duty and honor, but also the most important task of the government of the Republic of Poland.
Okay, again, it was an unforced error. Shouldn't have said it, but they're going to smooth it over.
Well, that blunt message came after Zelensky's speech during the UN General Assembly, when, from the podium, he took a swipe at Poland, calling out certain friends in Europe for putting on a show over the grain deal.
They're working hard to preserve the land routes for grain exports. And it is alarming to see how some in Europe, some our friends in Europe, play out solidarity in political theater, making thriller from the green.
It didn't take Poland long to react. Soon after those words, Polish PM Mateusz Morawiecki declared that his country will no longer provide weapons to Kiev.
And that's what I mean by the timing of it. But they're going to keep playing this up and playing it up as big as possible. And that's what I said that's what I meant when I was saying that this actually scares me, because if the Russians can create a wedge between the Poles and the Ukrainians, this is just a prototype of what they're going to try to do between the Ukrainians and other nations.
In order to focus on strengthening Poland's own army.
We're no longer transferring any weapons to Ukraine because now we will arm ourselves with the most modern weapons. If you don't want to be attacked, you must have something to defend yourself with. This is the principle we adhere to, which is why we have made increased orders. We focus mainly on modernizing and quickly arming the Polish army so it becomes one of the strongest armies in Europe in a very short time.
We discussed the story with political commentator Jean Bricmont. He noted that anyone who dares to diverge from Ukraine's stance quickly goes from friend to foe in Zelensky's eyes.
Notice how they're explaining this and how they're blowing it up and making it larger, where the Ukrainians are actually trying to tamp it down.
Zelensky has had an attitude of extreme arrogance, and also the belief that because he's a hero and is being treated as a hero, and the Ukraine cause has become such a sacred cause in Europe and the United States, that everything is due to him. And then
okay, if you didn't hear what he said Zelensky has this attitude of arrogance. He believes that because he's a hero, he should get what he wants, that kind of thing.
Anybody who makes any restriction either on grain export or on arms delivery, etc., is immediately treated as an enemy by Zelensky, and that in the end, of course, ends up irritating people. All the European countries and even the United States have sent a lot of weapons, and they don't have necessarily the means to produce enough weapons to replace those that they have sent already. He thinks he's a spoiled child. He thinks...
Yeah, even the United States doesn't have enough weapons for Zelensky, and he's a spoiled child. Of course, they want to amplify this kind of message, but it's a little bit too little, too late. This was the day before the video I just showed you about what Ukraine just put out, where they're smoothing it over. But you'll probably see like ripples on the lake or on the ocean. When the wave comes in, you're going to see more ripples of this continue to come through. Let's just hear the end.
Everything is due to him, and the Poles cannot necessarily do what he wants. I think the Americans are upset with him also. The Republicans are upset with him. Public opinion in the United States is shifting. It's more and more arrogant, and it's more and more demanding, and that hurt his cause, I think. But as I say, the commitment of the West was so strong on his side that it's not easy. I mean, they have no reverse gear, you see, so it's not easy for them to backtrack.
Okay, he's arrogant, he's demanding, and see, this is how Zelensky is. They did everything but call him a Nazi. All right, so, and then you'll see this kind of thing continue in other places. This is Chabos, who's also on RT regularly, talking about the missile. This was another issue. A missile that hit last year, killing 2, has been confirmed as being a Ukrainian S-300. Well, duh, we knew this, but a report just came out not too long ago. Air defense missile fired from Ukrainian territory. Zelensky had blamed Russia, called NATO to intervene, essentially starting World War III. Ukrainian government sources are now silent. Well, they're silent because they came out and recognized there was egg on their face shortly thereafter, because they recognized first. They said it wasn't their missile because they don't shoot at Poland. But it was an air defense missile, and they found that out after the fact. It was kind of like the market incident in Donbass just a week or 2 ago. Okay, so the Ukrainians are smoothing it over. The Poles are trying to tamp it down. The Russians are trying to inflame it and make it something more than it is. But that's the way the politics works. Okay, thank you for listening to me, and I hope this helps you understand why, what's going on with Poland and Ukraine, and Poland in the bigger picture in Europe, and what's going to happen from there. Love to hear your thoughts about this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What am I missing? You teach me about as much as I teach you. I learn a lot from your comments. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.